The Knicks are proving everyone wrong, including me. Leon Rose has a plan, and is he James Dolan or is he Donald Trump? Well, in fact, he's both, and he joins me on Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome into another jam-packed edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Before we get into anything too deep, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, like this episode, rate this episode, hit all the buttons you can, people. We'll talk some Giants, we'll get into some James Harden, even more hockey and 3 and out. And our guest for this episode is the man who runs the Knicks parody account on Twitter, Dolan J. Trump. It's a combination of the Knicks owner and the current president, and it would not sound like a perfect match, but those of us that follow him know it has been. So we'll talk to him about how he got started and turned into one of the sharpest, funniest, and let's be honest, those strangest corners of the sports Twitter universe. But first up, let's start with the headline. The headline is the Knicks. What more headline do you need? The New York Knicks are 2 wins away from the Eastern Conference Finals after walking into Boston and beating the Celtics, not once, but twice. Now, look, before we get into it, maybe you're a Knicks fan, maybe you're not a Knicks fan. Chances are, if you're anything other than a Boston sports fan, you hate Boston sport. There is no more obnoxious fans in the universe than Boston sports fans. They are number one. And in terms of hating Boston sports fans, these 2 wins by the Knicks have to be top 5 moments in hating Boston fans. To hear that building get so quiet, to hear Knicks fans who sounded like a pretty good portion of the building in game 2, it was fantastic. And to hear these Boston fans doubling down, we're still going to win the series. It has been a delicious couple of days. This is like sports porn for somebody who hates Boston, which if you're not Boston, you absolutely should hate them. Now, before I go any further, did I think this was possible? Absolutely not. I'll be the first one to admit I never thought the Knicks were going to walk into Boston and win both games. With the way the Knicks played against the Pistons, the way the Celtics are the defending champs, I thought that the Celtics would be in control. I never thought the Knicks were going to get swept, but I never thought that they would be the ones doing the sweeping so far. There are 2 parts to this. One is the Knicks taking these games. Down 20 points, staying the course, not being affected by the pressure or the crowd or anything like that. Jalen Brunson doing Jalen Brunson things. OG in game 1. Mikal Bridges with 2 huge games, being the defensive stopper that he's been. So part of this is the Knicks have taken this series by the horns. But the other part, the equal part to me, is the Celtics. They have given away these games, however you want to slice it. Now, the Knicks had to take them, but the Celtics have botched these 2 games in historic fashion. Game 1, to me, the problem with Boston seemed to be their arrogance. It was like they thought the Knicks couldn't possibly win. They just kept shooting 3 after 3. This is how we play. This is how we're going to get it done. Knicks can't hurt us. It almost felt like they thought they could embarrass the Knicks, and their arrogance got shoved down their throat. And you would figure, okay, a bad loss, but it happens. Game 2, we'll learn from that. And what was the narrative of game 1? Well, the Celtics aren't going to shoot 25% from 3 again. Oh, yeah? They've now missed 75 threes in 2 games. How is that possible? Now, part of it has been the Knicks defense, but part of it is the Celtics have just missed wide open shots. Game 2 was an absolute choke job. And now it's in the Celtics' heads. And you do have to wonder, maybe the fact they weren't really pressed in that run to a title last year, maybe they're not as battle-tested as a typical championship-level team should be. Jason Tatum is front and center for that. He has been a ghost, especially when you figure the best player on a defending champ would take over down the stretch. He has disappeared. 1 from 12 from the floor, 0 for 7 from three-point land in the fourth quarter. Game 2, 13 points on 5 of 20 shooting. And part of that is the Knicks' game plan against him. The Knicks did build their team last offseason with this series in mind. They thought it might be a little deeper in the playoffs, the Eastern Conference Finals, but Leon Rose went about trying to beat Boston. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges defensively have done a fantastic job on Tatum, and you can hear everyone saying it. He's not a superstar. He's not that good. He's had no big moments. I think that's overkill. I think it's just the Knicks have done the job that they were going out to do. And as far as Tatum, I love how everyone brings up the history of the Boston Celtics, that HBO documentary, all the championships. They've won 2 championships since Reagan was president. That's a long time ago now. But also, that history goes both ways. A loss in a series like this for a player in that franchise like Tatum, that is a huge mark on his career and not a good one. Now, I was on WFAN hosting back on Sunday ahead of this series, and my take was the Knicks were not winning this series. I did not think the Knicks were going to win. And I thought, hey, lose expectations going in. Expectations as a fan are the thief of joy. When it comes to sports, you can't enjoy anything if you're focused on what the expectations are. So you're better off losing those expectations, and then you're happy with whatever you get. A perfect example of that is Yankee fans. No one has higher expectations than Yankee fans. They expect to win the World Series every single year. They don't, and they're miserable. They could win 100 games. They could get to the World Series. Everything is a failure. Now, the thing about me is I would always rather be happy than right. So I have been completely wrong about the Knicks, and I am thrilled to be completely wrong about the Knicks. This is awesome. But the fact about expectations is true. As fun as these wins have been, I now have expectations of going to the Eastern Conference Finals. And if for any reason they don't, this is going to be absolutely brutal, and more brutal than if they had lost in 5 games and I didn't get my hopes up. But this is the playoff run we've been waiting for, and I will say this. I've been a Knicks fan now for 30 plus years. If this playoff run includes nothing else but ousting the Celtics from the postseason as defending champions, this will be maybe the best Knicks playoff run of my fandom. All right, now for a little something different here on Gordon Damer on Sports, we welcome in the purveyor of the very funny parody account on Twitter, Dolan J. Trump. We are going to keep his identity secret. Is it fair to say we can call you Jonathan for the proceedings today, Dolan J. Trump?
That's perfect, Gordon. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, look, I love your account. I think you do a sensational job. Where did this inspiration come from? You've been doing this for a few years now, right?
I've been doing this goes back to when Oakley was thrown out of the Garden. So it's funny that when that event happened, I always say that coincided with when the first Trump administration instituted the Muslim ban, and then the Oakley ban came into effect. And then I started connecting all the pieces. I'm like, wait a minute. Oakley ban, Muslim ban. I'm like, Dolan is Trump. So then I always would say that's like Back to the Future moment where, I hit my head on the toilet seat and then I envisioned the flux capacitor. So what's funny is I created the account, I had no followers. I just followed a few, people in the media. And then I had Frank Iasola come in my DMs, because I think I called him like a third-rate reporter or something like that. He comes in my DMs and says, MSG is going to shut you down by Monday. I guarantee it. And I thought he was going to rat me out. And then he's like, no, he said that that they wouldn't be happy with the entire thing. But lo and behold, here I am. I don't know how many years ago is this now? Like 7 years. I've been basically playing the character.
I was wondering because it works out perfectly with Donald Trump and Dolan Trump. I thought that was not something that would have immediately came to mind to me, but I thought it was a brilliant combination of the two.
And even when you look at the name Dolan, it looks like the name Donald, just obviously the letters are all scrambled up.
Right.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Now, did you know you had a home run with this thing right away?
To be honest with you, I didn't. And, what's funny is most people don't know this. So I guess maybe some people know from other podcasts I've been on where I revealed this. I grew up as a New Jersey Nets fan, diehard Nets fan, followed them out to Brooklyn. I did not like the Knicks. And then from doing this account, and this is when the Knicks were awful, this is right before Porzingis got traded and so on. This actually made me become a fan, but of the Knicks. I'm a diehard Knicks fan, bleed blue and orange. People are like, how do you just switch allegiances like that? But, it just shows you the power of social media where you can radicalize. I basically radicalized myself into becoming a Knicks fan. But in terms of did I think it was ever going to blow up? I had no idea. It's kind of funny when people say, when you just do something that for fun, sometimes it just naturally blossoms. And that's basically what happened. I have to thank Frank. Frank gave me a retweet early on that basically put me on the map, I feel like. And then Evan Roberts also one time gave me a shout out on air when I maybe had 2,000 or 3,000 followers, and lo and behold, I think I gained like a few hundred or a few thousand followers shortly after that. So I've had some help along the way.
What was the first tweet though that really you're like, you know what, I got something here?
Probably when I'm looking back, well, the one that Frank Isola retweeted. I was in San Diego with my wife, and we drove by a pizzeria, and it was called the Isola's Pizzeria. So I just took a picture of it, tweeted out, and just said, "Very overrated pizza in San Diego," something along those lines, like third rate. And then I woke up the next morning, and I saw that my mentions just blew up, and I went from maybe like having like 50 followers or 100 followers, then I had several hundreds of followers. So
Well, you timed it perfectly because over the last few years, as the Knicks have gotten better, you are definitely destination viewing on Twitter. You're up to what, 16,000 followers now, so
yeah,
it keeps growing.
what's funny, I was at around 16,200, and then this is like months ago. Out of nowhere, I lost like 500 followers, and every day I kept on seeing my following count drop and drop. It went down as low as 15.7, and lo and behold, now it's starting to grow back up again. So I have no idea how the Twitter algorithm works. Yeah, but the playoff time has worked great. I mean, a couple of my tweets recently have really taken off. Where I tweeted out something last night. I don't know if you saw it with the how he annexed Greenland.
Yes,
officially.
brilliant.
Yeah, and then like I see that I have maybe, I don't know, gained 100 followers or so in the last like 24 hours. But it's a little. I always thought it would grow a little bit bigger, but I guess 16,000 is nothing to.
No, nothing to shake a stick at there. Now, when you think of these things, when you think these Knicks things, do you make them? Is it a Nick thing that you make it sound like Trump, or is it a Trump thing that first gets your eye, and then you try to find a Nick thing to tie into that?
That's a good question. I would say, I don't know. It kind of just it works naturally. It's weird. It's like even with years ago, I remember the Knicks were showing interest in John Wall, and then this is right around the time where we're
Build
building
the
the Trump
wall,
wall.
of course.
I remember there was a person Trump was endorsing on Twitter named Scott Perry. I'm like, what are the odds that there would be a congressman that named Scott Perry that he's endorsing on Twitter, and then obviously the Knicks executive. So it just always works out naturally, even just with the Celtics with Greenland. I will say sometimes it becomes a struggle trying to think of something to keep it going. But I feel like there's always something that always works out naturally. And I will say it's a team effort. I get sometimes some followers who will come into my DMs, and they'll say like, "What do you think of this?" And I'll say to them, "I'll definitely use it." So.
We're talking with Jonathan, who is the purveyor of Dolan J. Trump, the parody account of both Jim Dolan and Donald Trump on Twitter, who does a fantastic job with Nick content. Where's the weirdest place you've been when inspiration has struck you and you had to go grab your phone to tweet something out?
Weirdest place. I mean, people used to always ask me like, when do you do this? Do you carve out time like at certain points of the day? No, I always say this is like a 24-hour a day thing where if I have an idea, I got to tweet it out. But I remember one time I was driving on the highway, and I saw, I was in the middle of traffic, and I saw Adrian Wojnarowski tweet out the Knicks just traded away Kristaps Porzingis. I literally had to pull over the side of the road because I'm like, I have to take advantage of this opportunity. So I started tweeting out, whatever it was to try to, I guess, calm people down, or, typical Trump fashion where there's chaos and he's trying to make it sound like this is a good thing, not a bad thing. So that's probably the craziest place, I would say.
How about the Photoshops? How long did that take to master? Do you feel like you've mastered it yet?
I gotta say, it's actually that's my brother who does all the Photoshop
nice.
work. I
This
have
is
zero
a
Photoshop
family
skills.
industry here.
Right, exactly. But he's too busy right now. He's got a little baby, so that once he had a baby, that was the end of him helping me out. So unfortunately, I got to recycle a lot of the old graphics that I have. But there's always a way I can use them. There was Sham Charania tweeted out yesterday about how Mike Woodson just was named. I don't know what Mike Woodson was named. What, coach?
Yeah, he just got a new coaching job. I'm not sure where it was.
Associate coaching of the Sacramento Kings. So
That's it.
I remember I'm like, that's right. I had a old picture of Mike Woodson, so I recycle that. But I mean, it'd be nice if I had some Photoshop skills that I could do my own work. But hopefully my brother will be able to help me out again in the future.
Well, you do have a full-time job to kind of keep you busy outside of this. I know this probably feels like a job sometimes, cranking this type of stuff out. You are busy doing other things.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I got my own family, but I find a way to try to do it.
You got to be, as a fairly new convert to the Knicks here over the last 7-8 years or so, How are you feeling now up 2-0 against the Celtics and in the driver's seat?
You know what? It's funny. I was watching this last night, and when they were down by 20 in the third quarter, and they cut it down to 12, and then Boston came back and hit three, and then the lead would go back up to 16, then the Knicks would get it down to 9 or 10 again, and then it would go back up to 14. For whatever reason, I was confident and calm the entire time. Normally, I'm a nervous wreck because I just felt like if we can just get it under 10 at some point, I just felt like Brunson and company was just going to come through. So I'm feeling very confident. I don't know about you, but I'm actually hopefully going to the game on Saturday. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I I pray I can go. But I'm thinking that we can definitely pull this thing out. I think Boston's being exposed now as being soft. So in a way, it kind of reminds me of the movie Rocky IV when Rocky hits Drago and cuts him, and it's like you show like they're vulnerable. So.
Game 2 to me is an example that, the Knicks took it, but the Celtics also, they definitely got tight in those moments. And you can see that right now, first game, it happens, it's a bad loss, whatever. But the second time it happens, it has to be in your head a little bit.
Right. I mean, you have back-to-back games where you have blown 20-point loss leads in the second half. So, right, at this point, it's got to be mental where, it'll be very interesting to see what happens on Saturday. I hope Boston's not hitting their jump shots, because if they come out tight and the Knicks get out to an early lead, it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Now, have you ever heard from anybody associated with the Garden or associated with the Knicks, not media-wise, but just in terms of the team, that you've ruffled any feathers with this account or anything like that?
No, there was one person, I can't remember what the title was years ago, but they went into my DMs and they said to me that they enjoyed the account, and they said that, there's people within the Garden that are aware of it, but, I was always paranoid that I was going to be shut down. I remember years ago, I went to a Ranger game with my wife, and, the Rangers scored a goal and the crowd's going crazy, and they're waving the flag, and I'm, basically filming it, saying that's a huge rally and all this other stuff. And then I'm thinking, like, did I just expose myself where I'm going to get, this is going to come back to haunt me? And then when you think now with the Garden, with all the facial recognition technology,
no question, right?
Yeah.
You got to be on you never know when you might slip up, right?
Right. Yeah. But no, I think, I think at this point, I don't know. I always said, like, if anything, I'm making James Dolan likable. So it's not like it's the thing where it's like I'm, slandering him or whatever. I feel like I made him a likable character. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. Being in sports talk radio for as long as I have, there was a time where he was the lightning rod of all lightning rods. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's doing this wrong. He's doing that. He's running the team into the ground. They'll never win with James Dolan as the owner. And look, it's taken a long time, but he finally has the right guy in Leon Rose, and the results are kind of paying off here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, forever. I mean, it was Steve Mills and all the other people.
Isaiah and Phil Jackson. Oh my God.
Yeah, Isaiah is a complete disaster. But once the Leon Rose hire happened, I always felt like that gave them legitimacy, where they're going to put the right people, and they obviously put the right people in place. Walt Perrin, Brock Aller. So they clearly, have a very well-run organization going on right now.
If Dolan J. Trump did get to run the Knicks front office for real, what's the first move that he would make?
I got to run the front office for real. It's, if you talked to me 2 weeks ago, but granted, I was probably prisoner of the moment. I probably wanted Mikal Bridges off the team, But now I got to say, I mean, he's won me. Him and Karl Anthony Towns have won me over. I mean, it was a frustrating season for the Knicks overall. I feel like even though they did win their 51 games, but I feel like there was something left to be desired. But Mikal, I mean, now I can see why he was so sought after by so many teams. Like, it's amazing how he looks terrible for the first 3 quarters yesterday, but then that fourth quarter comeback started with him getting hot offensively, and obviously ended with him with that last block.
And it's amazing when you have somebody running any team that they have a plan. And this was the plan, right? OG and Bridges to kind of be able to take the defensive mindset against the two-headed monster of the Celtics. And that's kind of how it's played out in the series so far. They've both kind of been shut down, especially Tatum in the fourth quarter. He's been a non-factor. And all the pressure now is on Boston, and it doesn't seem like they've responded to the pressure well so far.
Right. Now, I have a question for you, since you're in the media. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now I'm seeing everyone's, you see Charles Barkley, you see Shaq saying all the pressure's on the Knicks now for game 3. The pressure's on both teams. I don't understand how they can say that.
Well, look, I do think that there is pressure on Knicks to now seal the deal, right? If they blow this 2-0 lead after getting it. Yeah. But, when you're a historic organization like the Celtics, watching this HBO documentary about all the great lineage, for Tatum to be one of the superstars in that galaxy, if this is all of a sudden going to flop out and they're going to lose, this series after winning a championship the year before, To me, that says a lot more about his, maybe not more, but as much about his reputation and his legacy, kind of, as the title did last year.
Do you think the excuses are going to start by, they're saying I'm hearing now his wrist and Jaylen Brown's knee,
of course,
and Porzingis is sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything they can do. I've never seen anything like this before. I follow, all the major professional sports. Have you ever seen a team that everyone in the national media just absolutely finds a way to just discredit them or just,
you know what the thing is? I think that the Knicks were such an easy target. They were such low-hanging fruit for so long. If you wanted to make a joke, the punchline was the Knicks. So it took people a long time. Even when they signed Brunson, I don't think any of us thought that Brunson was going to be what he's turned out to be. But to think that the Knicks were wrong for going out and getting a point guard finally after 20 years, it did feel like that was kind of the tipping point where people were still kind of believing, oh, this is just the same old Knicks and it's going to go wrong. And obviously that's not turned out to be the case.
Right. I mean, my wife's from Cleveland. So, talking about like cursed franchises,
right.
You know what I mean? Like you're saying with low hanging fruit, but you're right. But it's probably also with the fact that it's the biggest market. So they have a joke franchise.
And Dolan was a very unlikable character at that time with, the amount of moves that they did not work out and the Oakley thing and all that type of stuff. So he was the most hated owner since Steinbrenner. It's funny, people that didn't live with George, they forget that George was despised in many circles until the second suspension, and then he came back and then they won again. It's amazing how winning kind of fixed everybody's reputation.
Right. And what did everyone always say about Dolan? His biggest problem also is that he hired the wrong people, but he was also loyal to like the wrong people, right? I mean, think about how loyal he was Isaiah Thomas and, gave Phil Jackson, I guess, how many years he gave Phil Jackson, but then even with Steve Mills keeping him around.
And it's funny, too, because when people criticize Dolan, they would tell you, especially during the bad times, well, he's so meddlesome, he involves himself, he makes these decisions. I would think that would make sense. If you hire somebody and it's not working out, you're more likely to be involved. Whereas if you hire somebody and they are doing the job, like Leon Rose, I haven't heard anything about Jim Dolan sticking his nose in or making this decision or that decision, because I think now he has some faith that the people who are running his organization are doing a very good job.
Now, I have a question for you again. Since you're in the media, what's your opinion about Leon Rose never speaking with the media?
I'm in the media, but I don't consider myself a media member. I consider myself more of a fan who happened to kind of be on the radio. I realize that while as a media member, I'd love to hear from him. I'd love to hear his thoughts and be able to ask him questions. The regular fan could not possibly care less. All they want is results. And that's the same way I am. So I don't really care if he wants to get involved. And with as combative, it feels like with the media has been with the Knicks in the past when they were so bad, it feels like there's nothing to be gained. And I'm sure James Dolan does not care in any way based on how he's kind of been treated. Maybe he feels like he's been misfairly treated in the media. So it's not important to him. So it's not going to be important to the organization. So at the end of the day, as a fan, all I care about is wins. If he talks to the media, if he doesn't talk to the media, I don't care. Just win games.
Yeah, I agree with you. Everyone makes a big deal about how Sean Marks goes out and gives a big press conference.
Right, I don't care.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Sean Marks is probably, I think, 100 games under 500 during his entire Nets tenure. Where they have like one playoff series win over Boston, actually.
Yeah.
That year when they lost to the Bucks in the second round.
Well, Jonathan, thanks for a few minutes, man. Keep up the great work. Hopefully the Twitter account continues to grow because I love the content, and hopefully the Knicks give you some more good content to be able to figure out a way to get Dolan J. Trump involved.
Appreciate it. Gordon, one question for you. What do you think, Knicks in 6, or are we closing out the Garden?
I think you have to hope the Knicks in 6, right? I mean, at worst case scenario, I like to go into things worst case scenario. This way I kind of prepare myself. So to me, if the Knicks can get up 3-1, I will feel I don't feel as confident as 2-0 should feel right now. If you get to 3-1, if you can split the 2 games here at the Garden, I'll feel a whole lot better.
That's a good point. Yeah.
How about you? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very irrational right now. I think I'm still off the high of last night. I'm not saying they're going to sweep them, but I do think they'll split at the Garden, and I can see Boston winning a game 5, and I think the Knicks could close out in 6.
Jonathan, great stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Yes. All right. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, now it's time for 3 and Out. First up, the beauty of sports is the ability to witness true greatness in real time, to see someone who is better at something than anyone else, maybe perhaps even before or after. You'll never see it again. And I bring this up to bring up James Harden and his ability to melt down in the biggest of spots time and time again. Whenever you bring up the greatest chokers of all time, Tony Romo's name comes up, Patrick Ewing, maybe Dan Marino, Greg Norman, whoever. No sport is more designed for the superstar to take over than basketball. And especially a superstar that has the ball in his hands, and Harden just wilts in the biggest of moments time and time again. And it's not like he never has good playoff games. He had 28 points in Game 6 against the Nuggets. Game 7, 7 points on 2 of 8 shooting. That loss had to be the most predictable loss of the entire playoffs, which, with as wild as these playoffs are, is not really even a stretch. And a lot of times with choking, it's just the ability to have another chance to finally right the wrongs of the past. With Harden at this point, the reputation is well earned. All right, number 2, this one is just a me thing, but the NHL playoffs are fascinating to watch. But at the same time, to me, playoff hockey is a terrible way to determine who actually is the best team in your sport. You know, there was a tweet a couple of years ago, I don't remember who tweeted it, but said that watching playoff hockey is like doing drugs while riding a motorcycle out of a helicopter. It is exhilarating. It is electric. Every game is close. Every game is one goal. Every game, it feels like, goes to overtime. And most game winners, unfortunately, though, feel like it's just a lucky bounce. It's just sheer exhaustion of the other team. It might be a great TV product, but if we're being honest, it feels like a borderline coin flip. And I get it. Hey, playoff hockey, you never know when it's going to end in overtime. And that's fantastic to a point. But sometimes overtime, okay, it's great. Double overtime, triple overtime. It just keeps going and going and going. And by the time the game actually ends, either you miss the game-winning goal, or it's more of a feeling of exhaustion yourself after watching 4 hours of hockey rather than the exhilaration it should feel like. When I watch the playoffs, I want to see the best team win. I want to know for sure who the best team is. And with hockey, the way it is, as close as it is, yeah, it's great to watch, but I don't think it's the best way to determine who the best team actually is. All right, then finally, for all the New York Giants are back talking, Jackson Dart is the guy who's going to rescue the franchise. We now have even more evidence that Jackson Dart was not even the Giants' first choice in this year's draft. There's video of Joe Shane while the draft is going on, calling Tennessee one more time, one last chance to see, while the Titans were on the clock, if they'd be willing to make a trade. Obviously, they didn't. They took Cam Ward. The Titans turned them down. But it's fascinating for all the praise of the Giants of being able to trade back into the first round to get Jackson Dart. We now know more than ever that Dart was not even the Giants' first choice. He was the leftovers. Now, maybe he'll turn out to be a fantastic quarterback. Who knows? Maybe he'll turn out to be better than Cam Ward. That we don't know. What we do know is he was not the Giants' first choice. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've made it this far, God bless you. Do me a favor, please hit that subscribe button, like the episode, rate the episode, hit all the buttons if you can. It really does mean the world to me. We'll be back next week with another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.